I am Joel. Sorry, good afternoon, everyone. I am Joel Fishman, President of the Public Diplomacy Council of America. Welcome to the June 2025 First Monday Forum, brought to you by PDCA, the USC Annenberg Center on Communication Leadership and Policy, and the GWU Institute for Public Diplomacy and Global Communication. Public diplomacy is a dynamic profession, always progressing. Advances in technology are clearly always in our minds, but so is our ever-evolving understanding of communication between peoples and with newer demographics. Public diplomacy practitioners have a long tradition of innovation, meeting those developments and often generating them. Since 1993, PDCA and its predecessor organizations have recognized these innovations with its annual awards program, citing the outstanding work conducted by members of the Foreign Service, civil service, locally employed staff, and all those who support our valuable work at binational centers, American Corners, and the many organizations that facilitate public diplomacy and mutual understanding. Today, we feature two teams, with PDCA's 2025 awards for excellence in public diplomacy. We take great pride in showcasing their groundbreaking work and the promise that work holds for the future of public diplomacy. Today is our award winners' opportunity to tell their stories. Our hosts are Ambassadors Cynthia Eford and Tony Wayne, co-chairs of PDCA's Awards Committee. Our tech host is Judy Kang, who also did much of the program preparation. And I would be remiss if I didn't also offer special kudos to all of the members of the PDCA Awards Committee. It is now my privilege to turn the program over to Ambassador Eford. Cynthia, it is all yours.
Thank you very much, Joel. For most of us in the Public Diplomacy Council, this is one of the highlights of the year for us, because we get to recognize the professionalism and the good work of the people, both in the field and in Washington, D.C. I think particularly we want to notice the leadership of those people who have nominated people for this award, as well as for the people themselves. We talk about the two teams who received this award, but we will never forget that these teams are made up of dedicated professional individuals. Our organization, PDCA, supports this award both by having a designated committee that provides writes out the criteria and then judges those submissions. But we do that with the help of the people in Washington in our bureau. So we are very grateful specifically to Jose Barrera, the Professional Development Unit, Department of State Public Diplomacy Office of Policy, Planning, and Resources. Without their help, we could not have publicized this to the field, nor could we have ensured that it was in line with all the appropriate regulations. However, the award itself is given by PDCA, and the money awards are provided by our organization, in part through generous donations by our members who believe that honoring those people who are doing the work today is crucially important to having a profession in the future. Let me just say that we have two winners, and there were many outstanding nominations. We will be awarding first to Embassy Riyadh and Congens Jeddah and Bahrain. The award winners are Ali Leilich, Davida McDonald, Lena Surface, Karen Bauer, Eshraq Al-Habaz, Sarah Badroni, Matilda Verilaud, Absusalam Alia, Siham Ori, Caroline Platt, Safa Al-Safaf. And I will mention the second group of awardees when I get ready to recognize the Northstar group. But we don't want to forget as well that this award is the result of the nominations from true leaders in our field, Elaine Ogden and Ali Layich. Because without their leadership, the nominations would not have come to us to be processed through the awards committee. And I also want to thank the awards committee for their diligent work in this effort. But let me not take up time. Let me turn it over to Davida McDonald in Embassy Riyadh.
Great, thank you. And I believe Ali will start by sharing our screen.
Yeah, and I'll start with saying a few words as well on behalf of the team here at Mission KSA and the amazing work we've done thanks to the support of our front office, prior ambassador, Ambassador Ratney, as well as our colleagues at ECA and IIE. And I'm asking, can I get a sort of sound check? Can this be seen? Okay, so I'm hearing we can. So let me begin, and I'll turn over to David. I'll just take a minute or two just to sort of set the stage on where we began this sort of process. And David and I and the new team sort of arrived in Riyadh summer of 22. And of course, we all remember the amazing numbers of Saudi students coming to the U.S. Some 10 years ago. So with the highest number coming there, you see on the left part of the screen back in 2015, 2016. And then a precipitous decline from that period. And that's important because when we talk about Saudi Arabia, we always have to remember, and we're lucky, in fact, that some 700,000 Saudis have either studied or been in the U.S. related to higher education. And so it gives us an amazing avenue to engage with Saudis. They know us, they understand us. In many ways, we know and understand them as well. And of course, that pays off incredibly in terms of our policy priorities. However, obviously, the numbers have precipitously declined. And what we really had to wrap our heads around was sort of examining our assumptions, why that is, why isn't higher education for the Saudis just a spigot, turn the spigot and more students come. And we had to really drill down and try to figure out what was the world we were living in today as opposed to 10 years ago. And so when we did that deep dive, we did come up with several challenges. I think one of the top ones that I think we agreed on was that there's a huge increase in Saudi domestic capacity. In other words, 10 years ago, there was X number of seats in Saudi Arabia. That number tripled in terms of seats for undergraduates in higher education, and perhaps a doubling of the number of universities throughout the kingdom. And so it's a quite different landscape, different market. Of course, that is coupled with a funding reprioritization for the Saudi educational scholarship authorities and an increase in the number of authorities. And I'll get to opportunities in a minute, but also the pandemic, of course, a few years ago sort of had the numbers continue to decline. And so again, we tried to wrap our heads around what we wanted to do. And of course, while much of the history of U.S. Saudi relations in higher education was judged on the numbers of Saudis going from Saudi Arabia to the U.S., that model was no longer relevant in today's world. It's a much different marketplace, a much different sector we're working in. And so with the Saudi Vision 2030, which include a lot of educational sectors, we've decided that the new push was really to increase that two-way exchange of students, scholars, researchers, and staff. And really, we've tried to wrap our heads around how to get to that. And for those who aren't, up to date on Saudi changes, the new sectors that came by from Vision 2030 includes new educational sectors, including the creative economy, heritage, hospitality, sports, entertainment, video game production, things that were unheard of 10 years ago. And a lot of these sectors had their own sources of scholarships, various ministries. So it was no longer just the Ministry of Education, but now the Ministry of Culture and its various commissions, which also had many scholarship sources. And of course, the Saudis also had this new push on attracting international students and researchers to Saudi Arabia, which again is an unprecedented change in their thinking on the importance of international exchange. And so we really need to get on that and understand how to use that to our advantage to define what the shared strategic interests are for us and for the Saudis. And I think the challenging part was to understand that Saudi part of it. And of course, we also did a lot of work from other parts of the embassy over the years. And as the situation, economic and security in the kingdom changed, we also happened to converge on this change in the travel advisory level, which also opened up a lot of doors. And so that's sort of the intro I want to make. And now I'll turn it over to Davida once we understand that the ultimate strategic shared goal was really an increased two-way flow in students, staff, faculty, researchers, and that's really what our approach was. Davida, over to you.
Great, thank you, Ali, and thank you, PDCA, for this amazing recognition. So I'm Davida McDonald. I am the Cultural Affairs Officer here at Embassy Riyadh for about 6 more weeks until I sadly leave, but happily go on to an exciting new assignment back in Washington. But I've been here about 3 years, and I had the privilege of kind of working closely on this project and seeing it through its entire fruition. I'd be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge an amazing colleague and friend, Lana Surface, the lady there on the right of the photo you see, who was really a co-spearheaded the entire project over these past few years. So I first arrived in Saudi Arabia in summer 2022. And it was not my first rodeo. I had done previous public diplomacy tours where promoting U.S. higher education was a key part of the portfolio. And we do this because of both the financial benefits that foreign students bring to U.S. universities and colleges, but also, and perhaps more importantly, the importance of people-to-people exchange, international collaboration in science, the arts, business, and how that enriches both students and institutions. So when I first arrived here in Riyadh, I had some preconceptions about how you work to promote U.S. higher education abroad as a public diplomacy officer. But I quickly found that traditional models of engagement on what we call EdUSA weren't necessarily applicable here in the kingdom. So like many embassies and consulates, we have what we call EdUSA advisors, who are usually local colleagues who are hired as specialists in the U.S. higher education system. And we have them here in Riyadh, Dhahran, and Jeddah as well. In my previous postings, I'd focused largely on guiding those advisors to do individual advising sessions or presentations to high schools or colleges about choosing a U.S. university, the benefits of a U.S. education, the application process. Saudi Arabia was a bit different. First, Saudis are pretty aware of brand USA and higher education. First, because of the sort of cultural affinity in a land where I joke there's a Shake Shack and a Starbucks in every corner, but also, as Ali mentioned in that slide that showed the sheer number of Saudis who studied in the US in the past. So there was a real recognition of the value of US education. Now, we were seeing more competition from the UK, Europe, Australia as a sort of Saudi scholarship system got reorganized, but brand USA was strong. The second difference was the importance of the state foreign scholarship program. It's still one of the largest in the world. And we estimate around 90% of Saudis studying in the US are on a Saudi government scholarship of some sort. But so a lot of our engagement shifted from these sort of individual advising sessions to engagement at senior levels with the Saudi Ministry of Education and universities to try to advocate for the US higher education system on these scholarship lists. And third, and most important for the genesis of our forum, we realized that recruiting Saudi students to the US was just one opportunity to really advance public diplomacy in higher education. There were so many opportunities available for US colleges and universities to form partnerships with Saudi counterparts. And these partnerships took the form of, joint programs, joint research, even physical centers or branch campuses. This was a unique moment in a wealthy, resource dynamic country that had big ambitions, that was newly open to internationalization, that could provide benefits on both sides. Ali mentioned these Vision 2030 reforms, this economic transformation that has social and cultural ramifications as well. And I really believe that Saudis at all levels have recognized that education is a foundation for this entire effort. If you launch a massive new company to build and operate across the AI value chain, you need skilled engineers and tech-savvy managers to run it. If you want a booming series of luxury hotel developments in the Red Sea, you need trained hotel managers and chefs who studied the hospitality industry. And it's great to have a star-studded Red Sea International Film Festival, but you want the quality Saudi film showcase there to be from trained cinematographers and set designers. So all this kind of ferment was happening in an accelerated time frame with a laser focus on building human capacity with international partners. We wanted those partners, we want those partners to be American, to benefit our institutions, to strengthen understanding and shared values, and to lead to future U.S. Saudi partnerships in the arts, technology, business, what have you. So all these realizations led directly to the Higher Education Forum, which is to date the largest bilateral education event ever held in Saudi Arabia. Next slide, please. So we had a very willing partner in the Saudi Ministry of Education. The reason this forum took place in November 2024 and took kind of 2 years to almost put together was we were laying the groundwork, coming up with the strategy Ali mentioned, and really building a strong, trusting relationship with our Saudi counterparts. We listened when they said, we want a relationship that's more than just sending Saudis to the US, that involves two-way exchange and building sort of these joint projects. We heard them when they lamented that more US universities weren't engaging yet in the kingdom to forge education, science, and research partnerships the way they were in Qatar and UAE and other areas in the region. So it was really forging that strong relationship. We did that by convincing the Saudi Ministry of Education for the first time to go to the big NAFSA higher education conference. For the first time last year, they just got back again this year. I accompanied the Minister of Education himself to Washington on his first official trip as minister to engage with U.S. universities. But we really thought it was important to bring American higher education leaders to the kingdom to see firsthand if this was a good fit for potential projects, to meet partners here, and really sort of engage with the heads of Saudi universities and ministries who could end up being those potential partners. So at this point, we knew we needed a good implementing partner. We held an open grants competition, and we found a great one in the Institute for International Education, or IIE. So we worked with Jamal Al-Sayed, their Senior Director of Middle East Programs, and Sylvia Johns, the head of their Center for National Partnerships, among others. They were incredible colleagues. They really know Saudi Arabia and the region, and also had great experience in managing partnership-focused events in areas like China, Brazil, India, and Europe. And of course, we had wonderful support from our colleagues in Washington, from the Education USA office, and ECA, a Study Abroad office, and our regional education advisor based in Dubai. The key to our success, though, really was being in lockstep with in close collaboration and back and forth and give and take with our Saudi partners, the Ministry of Education, various university heads. That sort of close relationship led to substantial cost share on their part, which is how we could afford to have this event at the swanky St. Regis Hotel. And they also brought in all the presidents from almost every Saudi university, heads of different ministries interested in collaboration. It was a real partnership and constant communication. Next slide, please. So the first thing we had to do was narrow down our participants. We ended up bringing out over 40 senior leaders from U.S. colleges and universities. We had presidents, we had heads of international cooperation departments, and there was a lot of dialogue with our Saudi counterparts on sort of who to bring out. And we wanted to end up, as we did, I think, with a nice broad cross-section of the different types of U.S. higher education institutions, ranging from some elite private universities to some amazing large state research universities to some even vocational schools and wonderful community colleges. So it was really a diverse list there. And of course, on the Saudi side, we had almost all the universities and many ministries on their end. Next slide, please. Next, we had to structure together our program. We really wanted to make sure it wasn't just a conference where you're talked at, and especially when more abstract concepts are batted around. We had senior folks coming. We wanted to maximize their time and lead to definitive outcomes that were a win-win for America and Saudi Arabia. So first, before the November conference, we in IIE held a series of webinars to prep our senior leaders. So we had one with the Saudi university heads on the U.S. educational context. We had one with our American university reps on the changes and reforms in Saudi Arabia and their university system, and one with everyone talking about sort of, pitfalls to avoid and best practices in forging these international educational partnerships. Then everyone got on their various planes, made the long trek out to Saudi Arabia, and we had the forum itself. which I like to think of as kind of a carefully controlled whirlwind, maybe a carefully controlled sandstorm in the Saudi context. It included stops in Jeddah and Dhahran, where we have our wonderful consulates for some site visits with universities there. But the main plenary, the main events were held over 2 days in Riyadh. So we had some keynote speeches, kind of set the stage from the Minister of Education, from Ambassador Ratney, from Deputy Assistant Secretary Rafiq Mansour, from ECA in Washington. But we really focused on events and activities that engaged in dialogue. So you see in that picture on the right, we had lots of panel sessions, but they were curated carefully to give actionable advice. So this one was on, some universities that already had made forays into Saudi Arabia and sharing their best practices and pitfalls to avoid, and a lot of give and take from the audience. You'll see on the left some of the breakout panels and small groups. So we had different sessions where you could, get in a table and talk about cultural exchanges, or how the Saudi Ministry of Investment talk about how to open sort of a physical presence in the kingdom and the incentives that are offered, or vocational and technical education roundtable. We had a lot of networking, and even we kind of called speed dating, where we had a bunch of different kiosks in a big ballroom, and heads of Saudi universities and heads of U.S. universities get together and really dig into areas they wanted to follow up on and projects they wanted to pursue. And the picture in the bottom right is a Saudi and a U.S. university reps exchanging information for future collaboration. Next slide, please. So when the whirlwind or sandstorm or what have you was finished, that's when I think the real work is going to begin. That's where the outcomes have started and are still rolling in. One of the outcomes was a bilateral MOU, a gov-to-gov MOU. And this, I think, had a little more juice, a little more punch than most of these non-binding MOUs. First, because one impediment that had sort of held some Saudi universities back from engaging in partnerships was our decentralized education system. And they needed some kind of overarching authorization, the imprimatur of the Saudi government to move forward that these partnerships were a priority. And this MOU, which took a while to put together, went all the way up to be blessed by the highest levels of the Saudi royal court. And so it gave that kind of overarching authority to engage in these important partnerships. It also had a very concrete outcome in that it authorized establishment of the very first Fulbright U.S. student researcher program in Saudi Arabia. So beginning in just a few months this fall, for the first time, U.S. master's degree and PhD students will come to Saudi Arabia as Fulbrighters to study at KAUST, a prestigious Saudi university in the Western region, which is fully funded by KAUST. But even more important, much as I love our own bilateral gov-to-gov partnership, what was really sort of important and continues to grow are the organic partnerships. And I think maybe in public diplomacy, our convening power might be underappreciated. We don't have to always fund every exchange and project. We can bring people together, have impact, give them contacts, introduce them, and then kind of stand back and some magic happens in people-to-people exchanges. The list of these projects that are developing and have developed from the forum is really long. I'm not going to list them all. Just a few of them: University of Connecticut and KAUST, a partnership on health technologies. Colorado State just signed at NASA an agreement with Imam University on collaboration engineering programs. Princess Noor University and American University are partnering on curriculum development. Rutgers president came out last month as a follow-up to the forum to sign an agreement with King Saud on business administration and public planning. U Chicago is deepening several projects in the kingdom. Columbia is creating an AI center. Watch the space, because in a couple of weeks, we expect a big U.S. law school to announce a program on training judges in Saudi Arabia. And one direct result, actually, University of New Haven, which came to the forum, then put together and announced in May with the Minister of Education establishment of the very first international branch campus of any foreign university in the kingdom to open in fall of 2026. So we're just thrilled with all this. It's just the end of the beginning, if you will. At the embassy and our consulates, we're delighted to play a supportive role. If any of the universities from the forum or any U.S. universities, community colleges, technical academies at all have an interest in Saudi Arabia will always get in the phone, explain the context, give them contacts, make introductions, and see what happens. And I will be delighted from my new perch in Washington, D.C. In a few months to see what really interesting and vital new projects Saudis and Americans continue to develop together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. I'd like to thank both Ali Lalich and Davida McDonald. The work you've described is truly impressive and more than worthy of this award. We also are awarding the Northstar team, which consists of 12 FTEs and contractors in GPA's Office of Analytics, which is responsible for the design, development, and deployment of the Northstar AI-powered global media analytics tool, which provides media trends and summaries to over 8,000 current users across 150 missions. Again, this is to a team, but the team is made up of members: Pat Barkhoff, Catherine Hannafin, Gabriel Rice, Aaron Holm, Caitlin Smith, Natalie Butler, Nicole Cimarano, Alexander Vaug, Brian Castor, Sue Tran, Abdi Musa, Alexander Roper, Matt Brower, Jefferson Ridgway, Yoni Levine, Sheng Sun, Neil Edwards, Giselle Lopez, Zuber Harani, and Lindsay Tharp Scott. I think we will now turn the program over so that the people who are directly involved can provide us with more details. And I think our main speakers will be Aaron Holm and Deputy Assistant Secretary Elaine Ogden.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity and the recognition that you provided us here. My name is Aaron Holm. I'm the Deputy Unit Chief for the Data Science Unit and one of the principal designers behind the Northstar platform itself. But just to speak briefly about who we are, we come from the R Bureau. We are the Bureau of Global Public Affairs, Office of Research and Analytics, and I have the privilege of representing the entire Northstar team here today. But we built Northstar with kind of a few goals in mind. One of those is to find a way to perhaps move reporting outside of Outlook and get that into a modern web format, but also to do so in a way that could potentially save labor hours for teams around the world. The media monitoring that we do on a daily basis is reflected in the embassies all around the world. We have multiple people that are doing this sort of job all the time. So if our techniques and our tools can help them, we wanted to find a way to share those tools with them. And another is perhaps to reduce contract costs from being able to purchase duplicative data. So if we're buying it, others at the State Department don't necessarily need to. We can share it through Northstar here. And so those are our primary goals. And I think having those key goals at the outset allowed us to have a very targeted, goal-oriented development process for how we got to Northstar. It's been happening for, I think, November 2022. We embarked on the effort to build Northstar, and we launched in October 2024 officially across to the entire State Department. And so all 100,000 plus people at the State Department currently have access to Northstar. You can log in through Okta anytime you like. But when you arrive, what you will see is the primary product that comes out of the Office of Research and Analytics, primarily the analytics office itself, which is our media monitoring reporting. So we have a team of about 15 or so analysts who produce reports twice daily, the morning and evening insights reports. We also do a number of pulse updates and other types of reporting that come out. But this is our finished reporting. And so if we look at this morning's report, we can see key insights. And these are human-generated insights. This is our team of experts that are using the Northstar tool and other things to understand and choose kind of the top stories that decision makers, public diplomacy practitioners around the world should be paying attention to for their regions of the world. So if you're an AF, you can quickly come in and see the top stories of the day and be able to understand how different outlets within that particular region are talking about those stories. So this reporting goes back about 2 years at this point, and you can filter to any type of reporting that we have. But if you are interested in a particular event, say Russia, Ukraine, you might be able to see our entire reporting across that entire span to see how that reporting has changed over the course of that event. Now, this finished reporting is great to be presented here in Northstar, but the real tools are in our the actual search capabilities that go on behind the scenes. Now, I'll show you in just a second how that search works, but some people would like to just kind of understand a topic and see kind of the analysis that we put forward without needing to build some complicated search. So we have a topic here, NATO. If I click explore, we can see in the last 7 days, the analyst coverage. So that's our human generated reporting that comes up at the top. But then you can start to see the data that we're pulling in on a daily basis. And so we pull in roughly 1 million news articles per day. We translate all of that non-English content. So that's roughly 600,000 news articles per day that we're translating from any language in the world. And we're using all open source translation models to do that. The reason we've gone that route to use open source models is because the proprietary models that exist out there are very expensive. If you go to the vendor and ask for it, they will tell you a very, very high price. But what we found with the open source models is that they are able to do translation at the same level at much reduced cost. And so as we pull back this NATO query for 7 days, we've got 87,000 news articles, 11,000 outlets, 182 countries and territories, and 81 languages. So if I look at our top narratives here, what we're doing with all of this multilingual content is using a clustering algorithm to group things together that are talking about a similar story. Because I can't read 87,000 news articles. I don't have the time for it, don't want to do it. So how can I understand the big stories as they're coming out? So as we're grouping these stories together multilingually, we can see that this is the top story. We have a trend line here to show us that this is still peaking. Kind of maybe 4 days ago, 5 days ago, had a little peak. A couple days ago, had a different peak, and now we're really taking off. So if I want to explore this, I can come in and see all of the news articles, 906 articles that rolled up to that particular narrative. So when I speak about that translation algorithm, we do this at ingestion so that all the full text of the article as it's coming in, if I don't speak Korean, I can see the translated article and understand all of the text that's going up to it. We also do some level of deduplication, which oftentimes if you have a syndicated news article, Naver is particularly big in South Korea, we will see that they have multiple articles of the same title, same content, just spread out over different outlets of slightly different names. So we want to kind of avoid that in terms of sifting through the news and only see the individual stories that are emerging. But so for our news coverage, that's probably our largest data source at the moment. But we do have some social media. Social media is increasingly closed off, both from a vendor perspective and just generally in an open source perspective. Getting access to platforms is becoming very difficult. So there are companies out there, Meltwater, Brandwatch, others that are able to provide this, but it's largely Twitter-based, a Twitter fire hose with a little other extra data. And we didn't find that that was particularly, what's the right word, pertinent for us in a global context. Not everyone's on Twitter and not all parts of the world use Twitter. And so how can we find a data set that will help us better understand the events of the world? And so what we found is a subset of social media that we call officials and press. And officials and press is related to our own embassy accounts. So embassies, ambassadors, political accounts, but then the other embassy accounts for countries around the world. So if I wanted to look in Italy, I can see what the Russian ambassador to Italy is saying on a particular topic, as well as the U.S. ambassador to Italy, and be able to target that event in a particular country and the relevant political officials and how they're messaging within that particular country. Now we're using a similar AI capability to kind of cluster multilingual content together and then summarizing it using an LLM. So we have a title and a 2 to 3 sentence summary to basically understand what are the top 5 themes, narratives that are emerging across the data set that we pulled back. Because again, 8,300 social media posts isn't something I'm going to comb through on a very detailed basis. So I want to understand the big stories and take that away from my reporting. Now, we do all the same translation and all that sort of stuff that you see here, but I guess our last data set is our own Department of State social media content. So this is data that, because we own the accounts or they're shared with us, we're able to pull back a bit more data on a granular basis for what we're pulling back. But this is largely targeted at our social media managers around the world who want to track their own ambassadors, their own principals, and how they're communicating and how that's being engaged. So those are our three major data sets, and these kind of my interest pages give us kind of quick dashboard look at individual topics that are emerging. But the real power comes from our search capability. So if I were to type in an advanced search, my favorite one seems to always be Putin, Ukraine, Zelensky. And so this is just kind of a simple search where we have all of these terms, any of these terms, none of these terms. And I want to search in a multilingual context. So I will translate everything into main languages. You can choose any language that you want. There's more than 200 there. But if I want to search across all of these for the past 7 days or so, I can pull back quickly build that multilingual query and pull back nearly 250,000 results. Again, it's going to be too many to sift through. So I can search for charts to kind of understand the top outlets that are publishing on this, which countries are publishing the most on this particular content, and when that's particularly trending. We can see significant terms and top languages. I'm very excited in the next few months to try to replace our significant terms of word cloud with some more advanced analytics in terms of sentiment analysis and entity detection. But those are coming. But again, to highlight the real use that comes out of Northstar, it's this top narratives feature that allows us to kind of group those 250,000 results into the top stories of the day. This will usually take about 30 seconds or so. But as it comes back, we should be able to see the various stories that come back to all 250,000 results. Now you'll see that we have one large cluster here at the top and a bunch of smaller ones. And that's because our search is so broad that the clustering algorithm doesn't really, the top story is going to be kind of a singular one. So we have this big cluster. If we really want to make sense of the news, we need to come up with a better search. And so I will look at something that our media monitoring team built, I think just this morning, and we'll look at their search. And you can see that their search is quite a bit more detailed. There's a bunch of languages going on here. It can be a little intimidating to see all of these different languages together, but what they're doing is pretty simple. They're building a simple Boolean query in English, and then they're using that translate feature to combine all those different languages. So when I run this search just from past 3 days, now I'll get 11,000 search results, have that same translation capability. It's hard to see in the screen share, but we are highlighting the key terms that match to your search results. And again, we have the preview capability for foreign language content. But now when I do the narrative search, it should come back with much more similarly numbered clusters. So similarly sized, because as we refine our search and get more precise with our search, our clusters come back tighter. Now, I guess I should have tested this before the demo because we still have one large cluster at the top here. But in general, the more you refine your search, the better you're going to have those search results for PD practitioners around the world to be able to see how different narratives are emerging in different regions of the world so that they can speak to those particular things as they emerge. And looking at our officials and press, this is our the same thing you saw on that other page, but we have 1,700 search results that come back across 12 social media platforms. We can search for press, party accounts, official accounts, Russian government, Chinese government, Iranian government. This allows us to be able to kind of hone in on those particular messages coming out of those particular countries and those particular groups. So again, the whole idea behind all of this is to provide the ability for our PD practitioners to understand the narratives that are emerging in their particular corner of the world and do so faster, easier, and hopefully with fewer contracts needed to do it. So what's coming up for us? Our roadmap is ongoing. One of the things we're hoping to launch in the next month or so is global TV and radio. So we want to, if we're going to provide a tool that searches the information space, we need to have as much data as possible, a complete picture of that information space, and that is adding TV and radio. We're hoping that this will grow our coverage in the AF region, which doesn't have as much traditional news as others in terms of digital content, digital things like New York Times, but are more on the radio. The other things that we're hoping to focus on are what I call advanced analytics, but you'll see here is named entity recognition and sentiment analysis. And this is going to be able to give us a way to more granularly and quantifiably look at trending narratives that emerge over time. So for instance, if we were looking at the Israel-Hamas conflict, I can look in the NEA region and see that Syria was using stronger language than other countries in the region as that conflict broke out. So the ability to kind of understand the content in a quantifiable way allows us to much more better understand the individual narratives that are emerging. So this is Northstar as a whole. We've got a lot more planned, and there was a giant team behind everything that was completed here. So those 12 names are all that I think we could fit on the form, but this was really a team effort across the entire Office of Research and Analytics. And so I want to thank the MMU team that helped out, the PMO team to make the change management possible to get teams to adopt this around the world, and of course the dev team for making it happen. In particular, Brian Castor, who couldn't be with us today, but is a big part of what made Northstar happen. So, and obviously, thank you to our former office director, Ryan McKeon, who had the initiative to push all this forward, and our DAS, Elaine Ogden, for having the initiative to push it all into the actual realm of product in the State Department, which just getting it through the bureaucracy is a big difficult. So thank you, Elaine, for that leadership. With that, I'll turn it back over to Cynthia.
Thank you very much. Aaron, that was great. Thanks for explaining that. As someone who remembers the old days of doing media summaries, my mind is blown. But I want to talk about how this today is a celebration. We are a celebration of our profession that provides a context for effective strategy, that provides the information required for effective implementation of foreign policy, and finally, the ability to evaluate what we are doing and how our foreign policy is moving forward. These awards have been made possible in part because of an outstanding award committee, which included Maritza Adonis, Ann Barbero, Dr. Patricia Kushlis, and Ambassador Michael Pelletier. And now let me turn it over to Ambassador Tony Wayne, the co-chair, to conduct a question and answer session. Tony?
Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks to everybody for outstanding work. This is really very exciting. So let me start off a little bit with Aaron, since he just finished in his team. So can you just say again, how many people have access to this and can go in and ask questions and search for things and turn it around in the U.S. system?
If you have a state.gov email address, you already have access, and that is more than 100,000 people. We have roughly about 8,000 regular users, and those are generally the people that have signed up through some sort of outreach, either through PD Now or kind of directly as a result of our PMO team reaching out and helping them with all the change management pieces to teach their teams how to use it and adopt it and get it a part of their workflow.
Well, that's pretty neat. So I'll ask one to your team and then we'll go to the other team. So for your team, who's also on the screen right there. So what have been some of the things you've learned as you've been building this over this last year, and that you've applied to have the teamwork between your users and yourselves to make this a more usable tool for everyone?
Well, I will allow my team to chime in if they have some thoughts, but I'll get started while they think. And so I'll say that there's probably 2 or 3 things. One is kind of the collaborative effort, the need for the entire office to come together to do stuff. It couldn't just be a dev effort. It needed to be the analysts, the devs, and a new team that started up, our PMO team. And so that PMO team is the second thing. The change management involved in getting people to adopt the system has been a much bigger struggle than I expected it to be. I thought, the tool's so great, they're just going to see it and immediately everyone's going to adopt it. And it takes a little bit of introduction and hand-holding to help people understand and gain the confidence in it. And third, I guess, is the bureaucracy at state and being able to have the patience to push through all the different boxes that need to get checked to get things over the line. And so those were eye-opening, and it really highlights the need to have a team effort across the board to do something like this. Pat or Lane, you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with all of those things. I think to your point about sort of all the people involved, I think the advantage that we have in research and analytics and in analytics specifically is that we have both sort of practitioners and developers in-house. So we were able to learn a lot of the lessons of application, how people are using this as we were developing the tool, which I think was a unique advantage and allowed us to kind of learn lessons along the way.
Yeah, and I'd echo that. And I'd also just say that the resourcefulness of the team, some of these solutions off the shelf, you talk to external vendors or things of that nature, and they say, we can do this for $10 million. And we say, we don't have $10 million. And so the team's kind of ingenuity in kind of finding these creative solutions that we can find that level of success with a tool like that. And that kind of goes into the second point of just understanding the art of the possible when your team really wants to get behind something. This team really took something that in the beginning, frankly, I had a little bit of skepticism of, we're going to use AI. This ChatGPT thing just came out, and we're going to do that too. And I said, okay, well, let's try and see what's possible. And then, the results have kind of been exceptional. And I didn't necessarily see that as we started with it. So just a lot of trust in the team to deliver and be smart about how to deliver.
And I think also just the the entrepreneurial nature of folks across the department. Like I think Aaron talked about, and certainly navigating the bureaucracy and the change management has been a challenge and continues to be a challenge. But I was also delighted and impressed by people who reached out to us when they heard what we were doing and wanted to be a part of it. We're pioneering sort of new uses themselves. So in that way, it's also been, I think, a department-wide effort.
That's pretty exciting. There's a lot going on there, a lot more than I imagined was going on. Congratulations to all of you. So let me ask Devina and Ali a little bit, sort of two aspects here, part of which I'm aiming at what can you share with others who are trying to do is get similar things doing. I know you were doing a lot of innovating on your own part. And so share a little bit of that. How was it building a team, getting everybody to contribute? And then secondly, maybe share a little bit about what you would say to other teams around the world, how they can adapt some of your lessons learned to be better at doing what you're doing now and what they also have to do in finding new ways to move forward.
Yeah, for me, it's really that understanding what the incentive structure and the infrastructure is on our partners. In this case, really our Saudi and truly partners, especially in the Ministry of Education and these many other fields, which, as David and I sort of pointed out earlier, are really a lot of fields which are brand new in Saudi Arabia and areas where I would argue that the United States has a comparative advantage in education, whether it's filmmaking, television production, video game production, cultural heritage preservation. All of these things are really things that we're really good at, right? In our universities, when I say we, and really understanding, there are frustrations. Why aren't there 100,000 Saudis studying in the U.S. today? Well, there's never going to be up to that number ever again, right? So forget it. You have to sort of, as Aaron was saying, you have to get over that sort of old think, so to speak, where we can't sort of break the mold of where we were 10, 15 years ago, right? And so we really have to drill down and understand, maybe we're missing a part of the story here. So put yourself in the shoes of your counterparts on the other side and say, where are they coming at this? How are they approaching this issue? And how could we address their concerns and interests in a way that excites them. And Davida sort of laid that out very well in her remarks and saying, the Saudis want to talk about getting American students to Saudi Arabia. Okay, that's great. Let's use that. One thing we didn't mention is this whole push that Saudis have, which is also part of this framework, and that is getting K through 12 education in Saudi Arabia, more American K through 12 educational providers. That's great. That's a huge interest of ours on the investment side. So how do we do that? This is something that we don't usually do in an Education USA context, right? And so it's a new sort of area we try to rip open and try to figure out how do we address that interest, which is not only a Saudi interest, but an interest of the US, because there are a lot of American institutions and private businesses and commercial interests, even on the education side, that could open up K through 12 education in Riyadh, which really needs it, or in Jeddah, which really needs it. And so I think really getting to the heart of what drives the other side's interest is really key here. But let me ask Davida to sort of jump in as well.
Sure. I'd probably give 3 pieces of advice. The first is don't jump in, spend time understanding your local context. As public diplomacy officers, we often have similar sounding portfolios in different posts. We work on, joint entrepreneurship projects or education or cultural heritage. They are so different in each local context that you're in. Your goals, your tactics, the folks you have to reach out to. So spend time understanding. So we spend a lot of time talking to American universities, talking to students, building the relationship with the Ministry of Education, with different universities here. We deployed our front office to go out and build these senior relationships. So understand, develop a strategy based on your local context. The second is be aware that one of your superpowers as a PD officer is your power to convene, which I kind of mentioned at the end of my remarks. Saudis were frustrated sometimes and they wanted to connect with U.S. universities with really valid proposals and interesting proposals. But sending a random email into the ether, someone gets in an info box at Stanford University, doesn't get answered. But as the U.S. Embassy, if we understand they're supportive of or have this project we've co-developed, we can go and we can sort of have that credibility to say, this is something you should think about and consider and get through. So that's kind of that convening power we've sort of deployed in Saudi Arabia throughout a range of different areas, from education to, working on with a national zoo, and the Saudis bring them together on an Arabian leopard project and a variety of different projects. The third piece of advice is spend a lot of time building a really functional team. This was a really complex project. It involved bringing out, I think it was 68 senior U.S. university leaders from over 40 institutions from all over the country to Saudi Arabia, to 3 different cities, bringing together 100 plus Saudi university presidents and ministry officials for 15 different events. So it was really complex, and it only worked with all the different pieces because we spent a lot of time before we even launched in building a very, very functional communicative team that could talk directly, that could negotiate, that could engage in dialogue. We also spent a lot of time, we're fortunate to have a very, very supportive, amazing senior leadership in Washington and at Post, and bringing them in, making sure they knew what we're doing. We had, deployed our deputy chief of mission and our ambassador to do a lot of outreach on our behalf to universities. We, had sort of discussed this idea with our Deputy Secretary Mansour, who then flew out from on the leg of an Asian trip. I'm sure completely jet lagged, but drank coffee and rallied and gave keynotes and engaged. So that teamwork made what would seem, looking back, daunting, very, very achievable.
And then I'll just add real quickly, sorry, also adding sort of the interagency as well, including looping in the commercial service and other colleagues in other parts of the embassy. So it's sort of a full court press. And again, we're very fortunate that we had great support from our front office at the embassy, and sort of them oftentimes reaching out to various university presidents at all times of night, and making a lot of progress there with cajoling and other such incentives.
Yes, well, Ambassador Ratney weighed in and said what a great job your whole team had done. And I think that shows that he was involved in doing this. And we had one other question, which was about the U.S. Fulbright program vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia, which is a little bit the other way, but they involve some of the same things and some of the same interactions. And basically, how is it working both ways too?
So traditionally, obviously, more Saudis have gone to the U.S. than Americans have come to Saudi Arabia, and there's been this tremendous opening. And the Ministry of Education universities really want that two-way exchange. I think it's a new model, a new dynamic to wrap our heads around, and trying to sort of encourage Americans to come and see what the kingdom has to offer, and kind of this back and forth dialogue. So the Fulbright program, I think, is an important step. As I mentioned before, we hadn't had U.S. student researchers at all in the kingdom until this fall, and probably in about 2 months. I'll have the first one's coming to KAUST.
Wow.
And that's critical, because they'll not only do great work at KAUST, but create those institutional relationships, go back to the US, maintain those ties, and that's how things grow organically, and that's how more of these partnerships foster themselves.
Well, that's really neat. I think with both of your teams have done outstanding jobs in getting these programs moving forward. And I think there's a whole lot in front of you that we can still do doing that. It's wonderful to recognize both of you for your excellence, both groups in your excellence in both in the outreach, in the analysis, in the back and forth. Of course, in Saudi Arabia, you've got to interact with both countries. And back in Washington, you get to interact with multiple countries, just not directly with all the actors. You get to interact with our teams, though, which is really vital, because if our teams are well informed, they can build off of all your good work and make the results even better. And so I think they're both moving in outstanding directions, thanks to everybody from all all the teams around the dealing with different parts of the world for putting this together. It was really neat to learn, Aaron, about what a vast array of data you've pulled together to let people look through and build from. And I think I learned a lot doing it. I'm sure a lot of people already learned, but I'll bet there are more that can learn and benefit from this. And similarly, Davida and Ali, from all your work, there's not only a lot you can continue doing, but a lot of other people in the world can learn from all that you've done and you're going to keep working on. So I want to mention that what we're going to move on to for the next month for July is to look at media and economics particularly. So we're going to go and specialize a little bit and ask some questions about how can we better use different embassy sections around the world, and especially working with economic and commercial sections, use those and the public diplomacy section to work better together to pursue some common and shared interests. And so this can again take a lot of contributions from different parts of the embassies to make this happen. There's a lot of good that can come from it, and we look forward to everybody's additions to this going forward. But I want to thank you very much for doing this. And Cynthia, I don't know if you want to end up wrapping it all together here in the last minute and a half.
No, I don't think so. But as you mentioned, our program next month, because of the 4th of July, will not be the first Monday, but the second Monday. So I think that for all of us, this has been an incredible learning experience. And I just want to thank all the people in our 2 award winners and all those who were nominated and did not receive the award. Thank you very much.
It was a great effort on the part of everybody, including those who applied and didn't quite get the top award. There was wonderful performance around the world from a range of embassies and offices. Thank you very, very much. Congratulations.
So I think that concludes the program. Thank everyone for attending.